They would have learned, quite a few things during those first 20, 25 minutes of the second period going into the French game.
Great for the coach, horrible for the players, because the players don't have the ball for a big chunk of that period of time. I think they might like to have enjoyed the sort of dominance that they had in the first half. They'd have liked a little bit more of that. Even 10 minutes at the start of the second half, they could have put that game fully to bed. And I know they were in control of all of it, but we know that the game can go down to a red card or anything at the moment, so that can make things very difficult. But look, France were incredibly interesting, and that's the only word I could put it. It was almost as if they didn't take the game that seriously. And, there's a mentality piece that you could be off by 1 or 2%, and that could lead to 20 mistakes or 30 mistakes. That's what it looked like for France. They were in total control of the game, but couldn't get ahead because they just seemed to be a little bit sloppy, as if their mind wasn't fully there, and they only just got away with it. But they look phenomenal. And if that clicks, we need to be phenomenal. And even when we're having the conversation, and people often think that this is kind of a media thing where you're over talking the opposition because it could be, to try and make more excitement for a game. But if you're off by a couple of percent, if things aren't perfect, Ireland's start last week was of the highest standard, and it shell-shocked Wales within 10 or 15 minutes. If the mindset was off by 2 or 3%, that mightn't have happened, and it could have been a really big dogfight. That's the nature of those games. And for us to beat France, because this French team are pretty awesome, we have to have that same start, and we can't allow that 20-25 minutes lull in the second half. We just can't, because they could rack up 25 points in that period of time.
Do you know what's the interesting, just on that, Keith? I was just coming in there, like, they won't do it, but I just thought when Jalabert came on, there was a lot more control in the French team. Like Ntamack, we know what he can bring, but it was almost like, as you said at the start, was he even there? Was he that interested in playing? It obviously will be a big difference next week again, but I just thought when Jalabert came on, they were a different team, and he's doing it week in, week out with Bordeaux as well. You'd question as a coach looking at that team, do you need someone that's in and going to take a lot more control?
Yeah, I think that's it. I think they'll still go with Ntamack. And like, what I would say is they were tearing Italy apart, and then a simple knock on, like silly mistakes, but they got themselves in the place to actually do everything, and they were pretty much in control. And then they started to panic a little. And what Jalabert did was he brought a cutting edge back on, someone who wasn't kind of infected by whatever that malaise or that 2 or 3% off was. He came on and just attacked everything, and became far more direct. Having a guy like Antonio, who is huge, and his hands are fantastic. But the second you see him pass a ball out the back, you're quite happy that a guy 150 kilos isn't running straight into you. So I think they got the mix wrong. I thought they wanted to play a little bit too much rugby. I don't think they'll do that against us. I think they'll kick far more. I think they will be far more aggressive with their contact when they have the ball. And I think that they will be at that space where they have to be. And our trick is to try and knock them off it. Because if they show any bit of lazy kind of freedom as to say, well, let's try this 50-50, we'll go down the length and get it, So we want to try and make them be a little bit awkward when they're going for those perfect little tip-on passes that they do so well, and we need to upset them. And I thought Italy did a great job. And Crowley said afterwards he hopes that people don't talk about France playing badly and talk about Italy playing well. That, as an Italian team, would put the fear of God into anybody. I thought that's the best they've played for an awful long time.
There were elements of naivety in the way Italy played in the first 15 minutes or so, and you kind of look at the way they were trying to kick and they were trying to play the ball out from their own 22, and they paid for it and almost paid for it further. There were a couple of tries obviously that weren't given. But as Keith mentioned there earlier, they were able to move the French forwards around in such a way that it really fritzed the French system. and to the point that it did get them worried. Is that something that we can take heart from? Is it something that we'll try and replicate, or where will we try and strike that balance, Fiona?
Yeah, when I was watching the game, I actually found it very interesting. After Italy settled down a little bit, I thought they actually attacked the narrow channels. I thought they were getting gain line. The internal French defence weren't actually coming up off the line. They were staying back. And Italy, the direct running, obviously stepping and using their footwork, but the direct running was actually getting over the gain line a lot, which you don't see with a French defence. You know, we know how they like to come up and blitz, but it just didn't seem to happen in the internal channels. So Ireland were similar against Wales at time. I don't think France will defend the same way against Ireland because they know exactly what type of big ball carriers are there. So I think France will come and have a different way. But Italy read the game perfectly. I thought you spoke about there was just Varney maybe lost control. He didn't have the best 20-25 minutes at the start of the game. He needlessly kicked the ball away, had a couple of errors. If you look back at that, you think Italy could have actually come away from the win with the win. They read the French team, they rattled them, but obviously the French came through and won the game. I think it's going to be different, and it's going to be a power battle against Ireland. We know exactly they're going to target our scrum big time, especially now knowing that Furlong, it's been said nice and early, Farrell is back. He's not playing games. He's put it out there. He said this is who's injured. I think they're going to look at attacking that scrum, and I think they'll attack Ireland narrower than they were Italy. They were trying to go out wide, as Keith said. They will change that up, and I think they'll try and get in gain line to create that to go out the back then.
Yeah, Keith, Sean Edwards was saying after the game that, you know, if we play like that again, we're going to concede 15, 20, 30 odd points to Ireland. Could well have been more considering what Italy did to them yesterday. Where did they go about rectifying their problems that arose yesterday?
Well, line speed will rectify most things, but if I just touch on one other thing for Italy, I was at the Stadio Olimpico, I think it was 8 years ago when they beat France. It's one of my favourite rugby experiences, actually being in the ground at that stage. It was absolutely incredible, and they beat France by the way that Italy have played for the 10 or 15 years beforehand. They grounded out, they kept their discipline a little bit better than it had been, and France were poor, but they got the victory. The way Italy played at the weekend was entirely different. They showed a willingness to try everything and anything, and there wasn't a fear of losing. There was a fear of not performing, and their performance was phenomenal. And I think that upset France a little, and we'll be looking to try and upset them in a different way. But I touch on Fiona's point, their line speed, French line speed. You want to try and get them back on their heels wherever you can, and if you can move them a lot, that's fantastic. Move the players around the field. They're huge men. But other than that, keep them guessing, because if they all rush up out of the line and you have an inside pass that can cut a guy in an angle, we'll see far more of Mac Hansen and Lowe working in off 10. You want to see someone coming out of the line, trying to make a big hit. But France are going to absolutely have to speed up their defensive element, and I think that they just didn't have the concentration on that.
Yeah, there was an element
that leaches into the attack, Richie. That leaches into the attack then as well, because things are not at the pace that you're used to.
Yeah. And that is just a sample of tonight's Monday Night Rugby with Fiona Hayes and Keith Wood. There is another one lurking somewhere about here on our YouTube page, so look out for that. And if you want to consume the whole thing, and indeed all of our amazing OTB Rugby podcasts, then all you have to do is subscribe to the OTB Rugby feed wherever you happen to consume those podcasts.